This question talks about a guy Arjun who has 5 friends: Julie, Sheila, Rano, Jamalo and Rita. Fine. Whom he meets on one of the days from Monday to Friday, one friend on each day. Fine. It is also given that he calls 3 friends on each day from Monday to Friday, meets another 4th friend, and does not call or meet the 5th friend. That means in all, every day he calls 3 friends, meets another 4th friend, and does not call or meet the 5th friend. Also, it is mentioned that he neither calls or meets any of these 5 friends on Saturday or Sunday. So we can say that every day he makes 3 calls and each friend is called thrice in a week. Now, to solve this question, we'll prepare a table where we will know when he will meet which friend and which he will call. It is also mentioned that he calls each friend from a different phone, namely Samsung, Sony, Apple, Nokia and Micromax. To prepare a table, I'll keep the days in the rows: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, and the name of the friends at the column: Julie, Sheila, Rano, Jamalo and Rita. Whichever friend he is calling on any day, I'll write call in that cell, or if he is meeting on that day, I'll write meet. If he is neither meeting nor calling, I'll put a cross there. At the bottom of the table, I'll mention the phone from which he is calling a particular friend. Now, if we go to statement number 4, we see that he has said he does not use his Samsung phone, which he uses to call Rita on either Tuesday or Thursday. It says he uses Samsung phone to call Rita. That means I will write Samsung here, and it is not used on Tuesday or Thursday. That means among Tuesday and Thursday there will be a day when he is meeting Rita, and on the other day he is neither meeting nor calling Rita. That means on the remaining 3 days he is calling Rita. The remaining 3 days are Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Fine. Okay. After that, from statement 5, he says that 2 of the 3 days on which he calls Julie are Monday and Thursday. Very simple. Monday and Thursday he is calling Julie, and he does not use his Apple phone to call her. That means Julie is not called by Apple phone. As of now, the options available for Apple phone are Sheila, Rano and Jamalo. Now, if we go to statement 3, we see that he calls Jamalo, whom he meets on Thursday, from his Sony phone. So the option for the Apple phone is eliminated. Now only possibility for Apple phone is Sheila and Rano. Continuing. Whom he meets on Thursday from his Sony phone, and 2 of the 3 days on which he calls her are the days on which he meets Sheila and Rita. That means Arjun is meeting Jamalo on Thursday, and he meets her and he calls her 2 days out of the 3 days on which he meets Rita and Sheila. We know that if he has met Jamalo on Thursday, he cannot meet Rita on that day. So a cross will come here. That means he is meeting Rita on Tuesday. Meet will come here. If he is meeting Rita on Tuesday, that means he is calling Jamalo on Tuesday. Call will come here. Fine. Next, we see that every day he calls 3 people. For Thursday, we have a meet, we have a cross. We do not have 3 calls. The 3 calls can be filled this way. Okay, so he is calling Julie, Sheila and Rano on Thursday, meeting Jamalo, and neither calling nor meeting Rita on Thursday. Next, one of the 3 days on which he calls Sheila is Tuesday, which is a day on which he does not use his Micromax cell phone to call any of the given friends. Tuesday he is not using his Micromax cell. The only possibility when he will not use his micromax cell is either he is meeting that person whom he calls from his micromax cells, or he is neither meeting nor calling. Now we see that in the table in Tuesday, he has already met Rita from whom he calls from his Samsung phone. So the only possibility on Tuesday is that either Julie or Sheila. That means he is neither meeting nor calling one of these two people, and he is calling the third people because he wants three calls on Tuesday. So that means he uses a micromax phone for either Julie or Rano. Now go to statement 1. He meets a friend whom he calls from his Apple phone on Friday, which is one of the 3 days on which he calls Sheila. He is calling Sheila on Friday. A call will come here. Fine. And he is meeting the friend from whom he calls from his Apple phone. We know that Apple phone option was left only for Sheila and Rano. And he is meeting the person on Friday whom he calls from his Apple phone. Meeting and calling is not possible on the same day. It is given in the mother data. That means he is calling Rano. He calls Rano from his Apple phone, and he meets Rano on Friday. So Apple will come here. From the previous condition, we knew that micromax phone he is using either for Julie or Rano. So micromax will be used for Julie, and Nokia will be used for Sheila, the only option left. He is using micromax and Nokia. Now the possibility when he will meet Julie will be only Wednesday, because Monday he cannot meet Julie, he is calling. Tuesday he has already met Rita. Wednesday is a possibility. Thursday he is meeting Jamalo, and Friday he is meeting Rano. So that means he is meeting Julie on Wednesday. The only possibility for Sheila is Monday. We knew that the day on which he is meeting Sheila, he calls Jamalo. So he is calling Jamalo on this day. We have 3 calls for Monday. That means a cross will come in front of Rano. Next, for Sheila, he has met on Monday. He is calling her on Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. That means Wednesday he is neither meeting nor calling. Now for Wednesday, we are left with 2 blank cells, and we have to fill 2 call options in that. We will fill 2 call options here. Similarly, we can complete the table like this. Call, call, call. We have a cross will come here. Call will come here. We have the complete table before us. Now we can go ahead with solving the questions. The day on which he does not use his micromax phone to call his given friends is micromax phone he is not using on Tuesday because he is neither meeting nor calling Julie. He is not using on Wednesday because he is meeting Julie. That means he does not use micromax phone on both Tuesday and Wednesday. The correct answer is option D, both A and B. Next, the mobile phone that he does not use to call the given friends on the day when he meets Rita is, he meets Rita on Tuesday. That day he is using his Sony phone, he is using his Apple phone, he is using his Nokia phone to call Jamalo, Rano and Sheila respectively. He is not using his micromax phone. Answer is option C. The friend whom he does not call on the day when he meets Sheila, he meets Sheila on Monday and does not call Rano on this day. Answer is option D. The day on which he meets Rita is, he meets Rita on Tuesday, can be clearly seen from the table.
Question number 72 brings us to the second passage in the mock. This passage was about OEL manga, as you might have read. OEL here stands for Original English Language Manga, manga being a kind of Japanese comics. Anyway, the first question which said, which of the following statements best brings out the central idea of the passage? You had to guess what was the theme of the passage, what was the central idea. The correct answer here is option B, which says, the unique narrative style that manga employs cannot be perfectly captured by non-Japanese works due to the different cultures that the gaijin creators of such works come from. Now, the point here is that the entire passage wanted to bring out the deficiency that non-Japanese comic makers face. Since they are not Japanese, There are certain things, for example, certain cultural characteristics or cultural styles that they do not understand, or maybe an original Japanese comic maker would understand these. So that is why non-Japanese comic makers, deal with this cultural deficiency, and this is why they cannot match original Japanese manga or original Japanese comics. This is the theme in the passage, which is brought out explicitly in option B, and that is why it becomes the correct answer. Option A calls OEL a lost cause. Now, this is something which is not supported by the passage. Also, the passage does not indicate at all that contemporary comic makers are hesitant in any way to call their work or call their creation manga or OEL manga. Since there is a divide between the cultural way that these people make it and the Japanese people make the comics. That is why this is something, option C again is not supported by the passage. Option D again is not supported by the passage, or we cannot choose option D as the answer, as the theme, since it is kind of a judgmental option. If you were to read it, it says there is no point of a gaijin creating OEL manga. So there itself lies my point that it's a judgmental option. You would not go with it, that there is no point of gaijin. This is again something that the passage does not say. Alright, we move on to question number 73. The question here wanted to know why the example of Darth Vader has been used in the third paragraph to reiterate or to highlight which of the following points. And then there were 4 options given to you. The answer for this question is option A. Let me read it out to you. It says, the dramatic style that manga authors utilize to pull a reader into the emotional gravitas here means seriousness, of a storyline is dissimilar to the style used by their Western counterparts. This is exactly the point that the example of Darth Vader was given in the passage to bring out. Now, what does this mean? This means that the author is trying to tell you that there are certain distinct divisions or certain distinct points of difference that are present between the way that a Japanese person would make a comic and a non-Japanese person would make a comic. We discussed this in the last question, but then here specifically the way that it was explained, the Darth Vader sequence was explained about Darth Vader meeting his son Luke for the first time and telling him that he is his father. It was mentioned in the passage how a Japanese comic, an original manga, would do it, and how a non-Japanese or a Western comic or Western counterpart of that same comic would probably present that particular emotional or serious dramatic sequence. And this is why option A stands to be the particular answer, the right answer. Option B is again, I would say, a judgmental statement which is not supported by the passage. It says it would be impossible. That word in itself cancels the option out. The passage mentions that there are different styles used by manga and by Western creations, but it does not say this at all, that OEL creating gaijin, the word, I hope you understood the word gaijin from the passage. The word means somebody who is non-Japanese, somebody who is not Japanese. So OEL creating gaijins would not be able to do justice to the sequence mentioned. That is something that is not said. They have only provided you with the difference that would be there in a Japanese work and a Western counterpart. So that is why option A stands to be the answer. Why is option C not considered here as the correct answer? It says that OEL fails to bring to life the depth of emotions. Again, this is not supported by the text given in the passage. We cannot take this, or we cannot derive this from the passage again. So let's move on to question number 74. This is question number 74. It says the author uses the example of Darth Vader in the third paragraph to reiterate. I'm sorry, we've already done this question. Let's move on to question number 74. Here is question number 74 on screen. Which of the following scenes in a comic definitely matches the author's conception of the ideal OEL manga? Now, by a reading of the passage, you might have gotten an idea of what an ideal OEL manga is supposed to be, as the author puts it. Now, which of these options brings out the parallel conception of what the author is thinking about original manga, original English language manga, right? The options were really interesting. The first one says a flurry of hard-written dialogues across panels that show this character called Leon wrestling an alien warlord to the ground as his lavish neon-colored hair flutters behind him. I'm sure comic readers and science fiction enthusiasts are drooling right now. Option B says overly cute minions gather around Gru, puppy love in their big eyes as he's sketched holding out his arms and picking each one in turn. Option C reads surface visuals are played upon heavily in a 2-page animated dialogue between Garfield and his anthropomorphic pet cat John. Anyway, that's interesting. And then there's an option which says none of the above. Now the point here was that this question was aimed at confusing you because it goes along with the passage in mentioning certain things which have been mentioned in the passage as the characteristics of OEL manga. For instance, flurry of hard-written dialogues, or characters with big eyes, or surface visuals played heavily in the 2-page dialogue, or whatever has else been mentioned in the passage. But then, what you had to figure out here was that none of these is the correct answer. None of these matches the author's conception of the ideal OEL manga. The author mentions in the passage that ideal, this I'm quoting from the passage, that ideal being that non-Japanese creators or gaiden choose to write comics using the forms and conventions of manga as a narrative style rather than just its visual tropes. So instead of just using big eyes or let's say exaggerated hairstyles or surface visual hallmarks, what the author says is actual manga or would be actual manga that non-Japanese creators or gaijins would make would be something which would have a strong narrative style. None of these options talks of a narrative style in that manner, and that is why none of these can be said to match the author's conception of the ideal OEL manga. I hope you've understood the question. Let's move on to the next one then. This was the third passage in the entire mock. It was about this UK scientist called Christopher James and his experiments and his path-breaking experiments, I should say, into telepathic communication, which, as the passage mentioned, that even though his processes are rough and the results are shaky, but then the principle of brain-to-brain communication has been met, and that is why this experiment is significant in itself. Question number 75 to 77 belonged to this particular passage. The first question said or wanted to know the tone of James's explanation in the second paragraph of not being able to drill holes in his daughter's head. He mentions in the passage that he was not able to drill holes into his daughter's head, which is what he eventually wanted to do, because that is the correct way of trying to get the electrodes to read the information from a person's mind. Now, is he being sarcastic? Is he jesting? Is he sad in saying this? Or is he being penitent? The correct answer to question number 75 is C, which is he's joking, he's jesting. It's obvious that he does not really want to or seriously want to drill holes in his daughter's head, and he says that his wife stopped him from doing that. It's a joke. The passage does not indicate that the author was sarcastic or sad while he was saying this, and this makes option A, B and D incorrect. So by elimination we can reach the correct answer C, and it is instead also very clear that he's being humorous while describing the design of the entire experiment. Let's move on to question number 76. Do remember also, friends, that tone questions are really common, and that is why it's a good idea to know the various kinds of tones in passages so that you're able to figure out them when such a question comes across. Alright, question number 76 says, what is the author's view of Christopher James' experiment in telepathic communication? More or less, inference-based questions want to know what is in the mind of the author. about the passage that he has written. What does he think about it? So you need to get into the author's mindset and figure out things. So the correct answer here for question number 76 is option D. Let me read out the option to you. It says, the author buoyantly presents the experiment and its results as nascent, yet a worthy crack at unlocking the secrets to telepathic communication. When I introduced this passage to you a while ago, I mentioned this point that the experiment in itself, as the passage says, the author says that the experiment is newborn, it is nascent, that it is still in its early stages, but still it does meet the characteristics, or it does meet the principles of brain-to-brain communication as is mentioned in the passage, and this is why the option D here. This is why option D here is the correct answer. It says that it's still a worthy crack at unlocking the secrets to telepathic communication, even though it is in an early stage right now. And this is what the author feels about the experiment, or James's experiment in telepathic communication. Why are the other options not considered? Option B and C are easily negated since the author is not at all critical of the experiment. Both these options went on to provide a critical viewpoint of the author, but that is not what we get from the passage. For example, option B says that the author finds serious flaws in Dr. James's work. He does not. Option C says that the writer is unmoved by Dr. James's findings. Again, this is not something that is presented through the passage. Also, option A would not go, since there is nothing in the passage to justify that he doesn't forego any opportunity to applaud his work. It's not all appreciation or all praise that the author presents in the passage, and that is why highly impressed by the cutting edge work and findings, and he does not forego any opportunity to applaud his work. That cannot be the correct answer. We move on to question number 77, friends. Which of the following statements can be concluded from the given passage? You have to find the conclusion of the passage. The correct answer of question number 77 is option B. It says, privacy is a valid concern when it comes to developing technology in telepathic communication. I hope that you remember this point from probably what your faculties have told you in your classes, that the conclusion is usually mentioned either at the beginning of the passage in the primary paragraph itself, or towards the end of the passage. And that is why when you read the first part of the paragraph of this passage itself, the first paragraph, you will come up with option number B as the correct answer, since it does mention certain pointers there. If I could take you back to the text in the first paragraph says that mind reading is a scary enough concept all on its own. It says, let me take you back to the text over here. See, in paragraph number 1 it says, but mind writing, it calls to mind the hacker deities of cyberpunk novels, skinny trench swath neos projecting e-thoughts into the skulls and all that. And then it goes on to say, this is important, with such basic issues of privacy on the line. Now, this is exactly what leads us to the answer, which is option number B. So, the first paragraph mentions that privacy is a concern in telepathic communication. Option B, therefore, follows from the passage. The passage does not at all indicate that we are far from or close to realizing a future with complete mind-to-mind messaging. There is no clue towards this. Thus, option A cannot be supported or cannot be taken as the answer. Option C is not the answer because the passage does not mention why the author's wife did not permit him to drill holes in the daughter's head. That whether she was scared of scared for her daughter's well-being, or that it was anything else for that matter, it does not delve into that particular issue. Option D says that LED signals are sent to the visual cortex since the eye is incapable of receiving such signals. It does not say that in the passage. Instead, it says that the eye cannot decipher the signals. It does not say that it is incapable of receiving such signals at all. And this is what brings us to the correct answer, which is, again, I will repeat, option B.
Here in this question, 100 notes are to be distributed among 7 people. And it is given that 6 of them, they received the same number of notes, whereas the 7th one received 5 notes less than the remaining 6. So, assuming that those 6 people who received equal number of notes, let's say each one of them, they received X. So 6 of them together, they must have received 6X. And the 7th person, Galu, must have received X minus 5. And sum of all this should be 100. This results in 7X is equal to 105 and X is 15. This very clearly suggests that 6 of them got 15 each and one person got 10, which gives you a sum of 100. Now, there are 7 conditions which are given here, but before we start with these 7 conditions, let's put the name of these people here on the screen. So, one of them is Lalu, then we have Malu, Salu, Dalu, Kalu, Halu and Galu. And we already know the number of notes which these people had initially. So let's put the number of notes which they had against their names. Obviously the first 6 people, they had 15 each, and the 7th one, Galu, had 10. Now we shall start dealing with these conditions one by one. The first condition is Lalu took 5 notes from Kalu. So in case of Lalu, he would get plus 5 and Kalu will get minus 5. One thing is obvious, that whenever you receive something from someone, there would be a plus against your name, and if you give, there would be a minus against your name, and every transaction would result in 1 plus and 1 minus. The second condition is that Dalu received notes from 2 of her friends. So Dalu received notes from 2 of her friends. We do not know the friends and we do not know the amounts also which she received from these people, but one thing is for sure, that she received something from 2 of her friends. So let's put 2 pluses against her name. We do not know what would come next to this plus and even what would come next to this plus, but she received notes from 2 friends, so we have put 2 pluses against her name. Condition number 3 is Malu gave 3 notes to Dalu. So if Malu gives 3 notes to Dalu against Malu's name, there would be minus 3, and now we know that what will come against at least one of the pluses. This takes care of Malu giving 3 notes to Dalu, and Malu received 1 note from Galu. So plus 1 here and minus 1 here against Galu. The fourth condition is that 2 of them did not give any note and 3 of the others did not receive any one. Now this is one condition which we shall come back to later on. Fifth condition is Halu was involved in only one transaction and received 2 notes. So Falu was involved in only one transaction and received 2 notes. It means Falu's final number of notes would be 15 plus 2, 17. Now, condition number 6. Lalu had 20 notes. 15 plus 5, 20. I'm putting this sign of equal to at a distance from this 5. The reason is that there might be some more transactions here. You might say that 15 plus 5, 20 and 20 here, but my argument would be that we can have 1 plus 3 and 1 minus 3 here. So Lalu at this stage is 20, but if Lalu gives 3 rupees to 3 notes to someone and receives 3 notes from someone, ultimately again the final score would be 20. So we have just left some scope for that. Alright, so Lalu had 20 notes and Dalu and Falu had equal number of notes at the end of all the transactions. Dalu and Falu had equal number of notes, and we already know that Falu had 17 notes. So even Dalu must have had 17 notes. And here, just keep one thing in mind, that Dalu already has 15 plus 3, 18, and there would be some more thing which would be put here. So Dalu is already 18 plus, but the final score of 17, so there has to be at least one minus. So even Dalu must have given something, some notes to at least one person. Alright? So this takes care of condition number 6. Now the condition number 7 is, there were 5 transactions in all. Alright? So in all there were 5 transactions, which means that these 5 transactions will give rise to 5 pluses and 5 minuses. So let's count how many pluses and minuses we have already put. 1 plus here, second plus, third plus, fourth plus, and fifth plus against Falu's name. So we have already taken care of all the 5 pluses. So we cannot put any plus anywhere now. And there have to be 5 minuses as well. How many minuses we already have? 1 against Malu, at least 1 against Dalu, 2, 1 against Kalu, 3, 1 against Galu, 4. So we can put only 1 more minus now. Against whose name? That we have to see. And we cannot put any plus anywhere. Now since we cannot put any plus anywhere, and against Lalu we already have 20 and the final score is also 20. So every plus here against Lalu will ensure that there would be a minus as well, or every minus will ensure that there would be a plus as well. So we cannot put anything here against Lalu's name. No pluses, no minuses. So no other transaction. So basically Lalu was involved in only one transaction, that he received 5 notes from someone. Alright. So absolutely nothing here. But the question is that how shall we know that the remaining minus which has to be put somewhere, where would that be put? So the obvious thing is, going back to one condition which we are yet to deal with, that is condition number 4. Condition number 4 is 2 of them did not give any note. Alright, even if I do not read the next part of condition number 4, I should still be comfortable. The first part is 2 of them did not give any note. 2 of them did not give any note, and we already know that Falu did not give any note. And now we know about Lalu also, that Lalu also did not give any note. So Falu and Lalu were the 2 people who did not give any notes. It means rest of them, each one of the remaining 5, they must have given notes to someone. Malu has already given, Dalu also has already given, Kalu has given already, Galu has already given. So Salu also must have given. So now we know that the last minus will be put against Salu's name. Now we already have 5 pluses and 5 minuses here, but we have to take care of 3 places where we do not know what would come. Alright. One thing is for sure, that Dalu received something from someone and again gave something to someone. And let's come to the receiving part first. So Dalu received something from someone, and there is only one person who gave. There is only one person who gave something of the remaining transactions, that is Salu. So whatever Dalu got, Dalu must have got from Salu. And you might have noticed that this plus 2 which Falu had got from someone, we do not know that who was the person who had given these 2 notes to Falu. So now that is obvious that these 2 notes must have been given to Falu by Dalu. So now looking at Dalu, we have 15 plus 3, 18 and minus 2, 16. But the final score has to be 17. So here we'll have to put 1. And from where did Dalu get this 1? From Salu. So now we have all the final scores. The final score of Lalu, 20. of Malu, 15 minus 3, 12 plus 1, 13. For Salu, it would be 15 minus 1, 14. For Dalu, we already know 17. For Kalu, that is 10. For Falu, that is 17. This also we already knew. And for Galu, this is 9. So, let's come to the questions. One question is, at the end of the 5th transaction, who had the least number of nodes? When we go through the final number of nodes, one thing is obvious that Galu was the person who had the least number of nodes, 9. So we of course know the answer. And the answer is Galu. We had how many nodes? 9 nodes. Okay. What is the difference in the number of nodes held by the person who had the maximum number of nodes and the number of nodes held by the person with the least number of nodes? So coming to the previous slide, you can easily see that Lalu was the person who got maximum number of nodes, which was 20. And the person who got least number of nodes was Galu, which is 9. So the difference of 20 and 9 is 11. And you know the answer here also, 11. Next, who had fewer nodes than Malu? If we refer to the place where we had done all the scribbling, so those two people who received fewer number of nodes than Malu, so Malu had received 13, and there are two people who received less than 13. One is Kalu, who received 10, and Galu, who received 9. So Kalu and Galu is your answer, which is your choice number A.
And we move on to question number 81, which was the next question. This passage, which had questions number 81 to 84, this passage was about complementary and alternative medicine, CAM, as was mentioned in the passage, CAM, and the way that allopathic medicine is more or less on the decline. The use of allopathic medicine is more or less on the decline, and how CAM is more reliable than modern medicine. So, is there any indication of that in the passage? This is what question number 81 wanted to know. This is what question number 81 says. According to the passage, why is there a movement towards complementary and alternative medicine? Has it been mentioned in the passage that these medicines or CAM provides better quality of life, or that it is available at less cost? The correct answer here is option B, which says that these medicines may provide gentler treatment and focus on quality of life. This is what CAM does, as supported or as mentioned through the text of the passage. It does not say that these medicines are more reliable because they have been used for thousands of years. That is not something that the passage says. It does not say that these medicines are available at a fraction of cost that modern medicine demands, or that such a treatment that CAM is less expensive than what modern medicine demands from you. Or option D again also says that, and it can be ruled out because through the first paragraph we know that the paragraph mentions that 60% doctors do not listen to their patients, and the passage does not suggest that modern medicine does not look at treatment from the patient's perspective. It does not say that modern medicine does not look at treatment from the patient's point of view. This is something which is not mentioned in the text, and this is why we cannot take that as the answer. The correct answer to question 81 again is option B. I think this passage was pretty easy. You should have at least attempted this one for sure. Question number 82 was an inference question. It wanted to know which of the following can be inferred on the basis of the passage. The answer to question number 82 is option D, which said none of the above. All three options A, B and C which have been given cannot be inferred from the passage. For instance, option A says that Western medicine is based on doubtful methodology, such as double-blind or randomized clinical trials. The passage does mention some lacunae or some weaknesses, let's say, in the application of modern medicine, but it does not suggest that Western medicine is dubious or that it involves questionable methodology. So that is why we cannot infer this from the passage. Similarly, for option B, the passage only or just mentions that traditional medicine is still the most commonly used form, I should say, or most common form of medicinal care in most countries. But it does not say that traditional medicine is the most commonly used form of medical care across the world. So there is a difference between many countries and across the world, and that is what makes us negate option B. Option C said that while practitioners of Western medicine reject CAM, patients who adopt alternative medicine usually heal faster. Now, this is again something which the passage does not offer. The passage does not indicate that of which of the two forms of medicine offers better healing or faster healing. This is again something that we cannot take from the passage, which brings us to the correct answer, which is option D, which is none of the above. Question number 83 again belonged to the same passage itself. It says the author of the passage is most likely to agree with which of the following statements. Again, you had to read the passage pretty well to figure out this question, to figure out the right answer, which, by the way, was for question number 83 was option B, which says blending the best of the treatment methodologies of CAM and Western medicine is the requirement of the times. This is what the author will probably go along with, because the passage points out benefits of CAM in the outset of the passage. At the very outset of the passage, it mentions some shortcomings of modern medicine. Then it goes on to mention the benefits of CAM, and that is why the author is most likely to agree with the idea that blending the best of both, which is CAM, the treatment methodologies of CAM, and Western medicine, is what is required in our times. Prince Charles' statement and the last paragraph of the passage, if you have read the text, also provide support for this particular idea. Hence, option B is the correct answer. The passage states that the movement to integrate different systems is rejected by mainstream practitioners of Western medicine. It does not, though, suggest that mainstream practitioners are attempting to create a new treatment system. It says that they reject CAM, but it is not mentioned that they are trying to create something new. Therefore, option A cannot be supported by the passage. The passage states also from the text itself that traditional medicine remains the most commonly used form of medical care. We just discussed this in the last question. 80% in Africa, 70% in India, 50%, those are the figures which are given. So option C contradicts this idea, which says that alternative medicine has been sidelined in India. No, it says that 70% people in India go for alternate medicine, traditional medicine, which is the most commonly used form of medicinal care. Even in India, 70% it says. And this is why option C cannot be the answer. Option D is out of scope, since it talks of a global movement that blends good science with good sense. This is something which is not at all involved or indicated from the passage. Anyway, let's move on to question number 84. This was the last question from this passage. It wanted to know which of the following questions would you be most likely to ask the author at the end of the passage. Now, this is a good question. This is the kind of question which deals with the scope of the passage. It deals with the scope of the passage. It wants to know what would the passage continue into. You have done para completion questions, and this is something like that. So you had to read the passage, you had to know what is the theme of the passage, the tone of the passage, and then to what particular scope would the tone and theme continue, what would be the next paragraph, or what would be the question probably that you would be most likely ask the author at the end of the passage. It had to, any question which would be the answer here would have to have the same theme and the tone as the passage itself. This is why the correct answer to question number 84 is option B, which says what are some of the ways in which people or hospitals are integrating Western medicine with CAM-based treatment systems. Don't you think this is exactly what the author would probably mention in the next paragraph, or he would want to answer this question if you were to ask him that? Because in the passage he does mention that there is a need for an integration of Western medicine with CAM, and this is why any question which would be based on such an integration would be the correct answer here in this question. All the other questions are either out of scope or do not deal with the information mentioned or given in the passage. For instance, option A presents a question that has already been answered in the third paragraph. If you were to pay attention, it says that why do mainstream practitioners reject attempts to integrate CAM? It's already, the reason has been given in the passage. Option C can be ruled out because it refers to the past, whereas the passage talks about contemporary or present efforts to integrate Western medicine and CAM. Option D talks about other fields which have not been even mentioned in the passage at all, and this is why we can rule out option D. This, my friends, brings us to question number 85, which was a fill-in-the-blank question. It's here on your screen. Question number 85 had two blanks. The sentence read, there is excellent dash, there's a blank there, of responsibility and accountability among the large number of functionaries working under different dash structures. Now, a crowd or gathering disperses while information is disseminated. Isn't that something which is clear from this particular paragraph? We know this, that a crowd or gathering, when they are to part ways, we would say that they have dispersed, while information we know is disseminated. That's the correct phrase that we use for information. Thus, dispersion and dissemination do not fit the given context. This is why option C cannot be the answer. Diminution of responsibility would mean reduction. Diminution means reduction or lessening of responsibility and accountability, which again does not fit with the word excellent which is given here, because it says there is an excellent dash of responsibility. So this is why option A cannot be the answer, since it uses the word diminution. Again, division of responsibility and accountability among functionaries fits the context of the given sentence, right? Hierarchical structures also is correct, and this is why option B is the correct answer. If we were to read it again, it would make sense. There is excellent division of responsibility and accountability. That responsibility is divided among a large number of functionaries or people working under different hierarchical structures. The division of responsibility would mean a hierarchical structure, would mean a hierarchy, and this is what is the answer. Option B gives us the correct answer to this question, which brings us to question number 86, which was a parajumble. The correct answer to this question, which is on your screen here, is option D, which is CEADB. Let me explain this sequence to you. CE forms the mandatory pair here, C and then followed by E. C states that the country has changed. It says, I have seen how the country has practically been rebuilt from rubble, while E describes the impact of this change. Right? E says that they now have towns and cities now have an acceptable level of infrastructure and civic amenities. That's the change which has been mentioned in E. Sentences A, B and D should be placed together in a sequence, since all of them refer to the impact in the context of education. So how does the sequence go now? C says that the country has changed, E says what the change has been, and then these three sentences, which are A, B and D, narrow down the change in one particular context, which is the impact of that the change has had on education. So this is why the correct sequence is CE followed by A, D and B, and hence this is the correct answer. Option D is the correct answer here. No other option went as close to providing the correct sequence here. So let's move on to question number 87. The question says, given below are 5 sentences, which each sentence has a pair of words that are italicized. From the italicized words, select the most appropriate words to form correct sentences. This question was a homonym question. There were different homonyms given in the sentences below, and you had to choose which one was the correct word which had to be used here. There were different confusing words given here. For instance, in the first sentence it said, humor used the right way at the right time can be just what you need to diffuse a conflict at work. Which is the diffuse that you would use here? Anyway, let me give you the correct answer first. There were 4 options which you had to choose from sequence options, and the correct answer here is C, which is B, A, and again A. So the correct answer to the first sentence was option B, which is DEFUSE, which means to make a situation less tense. We are talking about conflict here, and that is why to make conflict lesser, we would use the word DEFUSE. The other diffuse, which is DIFFUSE, means to spread over a wide area and does not fit the given sentence. That's why it's not the answer. Disinterested and uninterested, most people are usually confused between these two words. Disinterested, let me explain, means to be impartial, or means to be disinterested. Disinterested means not to be interested, or you're neutral, more or less, right? And this is what correctly completes the sentence given here, since it says that Germany's friendship was not entirely disinterested and had to be fostered with the railway. So it had to be fostered. It had to be the friendship needed to warm up because of let's say by the reason or by the cause of a railway or a loan concession from time to time. This is why we use the word disinterested, that they were neutral at first. The word uninterested means that you are not interested at all in something. So there's a difference between being let's say negatively interested in something, that you're not at all interested, and being neutral. So that is what is the difference between these two words. Sentence number 3 wanted to know the difference between wreath and wreath, WREATH, which means a ring shaped or a crown of flowers, or a garland which is in the shape of a ring, which is usually worn on your head. It used to be worn by champions in ancient Rome. You must probably remember it now. The other wreath, which is WREATHE, is a verb which means to surround or encircle. So we know that Princess Anne was wearing a wreath, which is WREATH. Slice the roe and slowly braise for half an hour in the mixture, adding the pimento. PRAZE is to solder or join two things together using let's say something which is a metal. You join two metals together by brazing, BRAZE. BRAISE is a word which is used in the context of cooking, since it means that you cook something slowly in a liquid, and that is why the word here has to be BRAISE, braise. Continual and continuous in sentence 5th. Continual is a correct word here because it refers to something that is repeated with breaks in between. Intermittent is what we call it. While continuous is something that does not stop at all. So that's the difference between continual and continuous. Continuous goes on for let's say for without any break in between, and continual has breaks in between. This is what brings us to the correct option, which is option number C for question 87. Question number 88 was a question that wanted to know which of the 4 sentences does not fit the sequence. There were 4 sentences jumbled up. You had to find out 3 which are in a sequence together. 1 was not. The text here, if you were to read the 4 sentences, you would find out that option B is the odd one out, since it's the only one that moves away from talking of an egalitarianist society and starts to speak of, very abruptly I should say, of one perspective societies. all the other options, which eventually the sequence should be D, A and C in that sequence. These statements are, they form a sequence together. Option B is the one which is the odd one out. If I were to explain the sequence to you, we start with sentence the sentence in option D, which talks about egalitarianists who are positive towards groups but negative towards rules. So which means that they form groups but they do not have rules. This is supported by in option A, which says that the fabric of an egalitarianist society is therefore held together by cooperation, which refers to groups again, and implicit peer pressure, again groups, rather than by explicit rules, which says that they are negative towards rules, as we read in option D. What follows is option C, which speaks of the egalitarianist society as a form of anarchist equality. They do not have rules, that's why there's an anarchy. While they have groups, they have peer pressure, which mentions equality here, which is why equality is mentioned here, and this is the correct sequence. This is why option B is the odd one out. Let us move on to question number 89, which was a grammar question. I told you had to brush up on your grammar to know these questions, and these questions you'll see them pretty frequently in the mocks to come. So you might as well take out that grammar book which has been gathering dust and turn its pages. Anyway, question number 89, the correct answer is option D. Only D had was the most appropriate option here. If you were to pay attention to sentence D, that is the only incorrect one, I'm sorry. It says, would it really kill him to write a single sentence correct? It might sound to be grammatically appropriate, but is not, since there is a verb in this statement which is write, and you're using an adverb for it, which is why the word correct should be in an adverb form and should be thus become correctly. So that is why the correct answer again is correctly instead of correct, and which is why we choose option D, which is only D is the incorrect option here. I hope you understand this question. Let us then move on. All the other statements in the question were absolutely grammatically correct. Let's move on to question number 90, which was again a question based on grammar and usage. You have to figure out which of these five options, which of these five sentences is incorrect in grammar and usage, and you have to choose from the correct four options which have been given. Question number 90, the correct answer is A, which means that sentences A, B and C are incorrect. Why is sentence A incorrect? Because of an error in parallel construction. You must know about that, about parallelism. The sentence should be corrected to the Delhi University started the Gyanodaya Express in 2012 with the aim of giving students an idea of life outside the campus and of creating. Since it says of giving, that is why the other verb form also should be parallel and should be of creating a database of problems in rural areas. So this is why sentence A is incorrect. That's the change in sentence A. Sentence B is incorrect again because this time because of the use of an incorrect preposition. At the Cluster Innovation Center, the student completed a project on literature and in mathematics, it says. It should be a project was completed on literature and mathematics. It's the project word, the word project here is singular. It includes both the subjects, and hence two different prepositions should not be used before mathematics and literature. It should be that a project was completed on literature and mathematics. Right? So that is why literature and mathematics will both use the same preposition, which is on, and no separate preposition for mathematics, which is why in is not needed here in sentence B. Sentence C is incorrect because when referring to a specific detail, one should use the definite article. And this is why in the given sentence, the definite article is missing before the reference to the specific detail of the monuments. Isn't that what you see here on the screen? This is why the correct answer should be the second part of the report devoted to mathematics speaks about the symmetry and architecture of the monuments, because you're referring to the specific symmetry and architecture of the monuments. We know of that. That is why the definite article, it's a definite thing that we know of. This is why the definite article should be used there. And also there's another reason that symmetry and architecture are two separate features. This is also why before both nouns the definite article should be used. And this is why it should be about the symmetry and the architecture of the monuments in these cities. That is what the correct answer is. I hope you now know why these sentences were incorrect, which makes us move on to the next question, which is question number 91. This question again, question number 91, was based on parajumbles, the odd one out kind of question. You have to figure out which of these four sentences does not belong to this correct sequence, and you have to also figure out what is the correct sequence in here. The answer to question number 91 is option C. Naming and shaming as an end in itself serves little purpose. This was a question which was out of scope of the sequence which is here. The correct sequence is B, D and A. I'll explain how it is B, D and A. Sentence B asserts that Sri Lanka should be our closest neighbor by all yardsticks, by all measures. It says that including cultural and emotional pointers, Sri Lanka is supposed to be our closest neighbor. And sentence D brings a factual statement into view to support this assertion that we just made in sentence B. It reads that both the majority, which are the Sinhala Buddhists, and the Tamil Hindus have umbilical ties with India, have close ties with India, and this is why they are our closest neighbors, Sri Lanka. The next in the sequence is option A, which says that this being the case, it is not understood why the foreign policy establishment in India experiences extreme discomfort every time that the Sri Lankan issue figures in a multilateral setting. So this is why option C does not fit with the other sentences. Option A is the contradiction after B and D, and this is why C does not fit the particular context. It is not part of the sequence, which is B, D and A, and that is why the answer to question number 91 is option C. I hope you've understood this question. Let's move on to question number 92, which again brought on the case of a homonym question. There were confusing words given in the sentences here. You had to choose between the two. Mark the correct option from the four options which were given. The correct answer here in question number 92 is B. If you were to pay attention to the sentences, in the first sentence, that is sentence 1, the situation was at last put in to by the city authorities, who probably felt that they were not playing a very credible role. Which should be the correct answer here? The answer to this one is creditable, because it denotes something that is worthy of praise or respect, while credible, as we all know, is something which is believable. So we know that these people were not playing a credible part. We know that the word has to be creditable here. The therapist innervated or enervated the shoulders with a massage. The correct answer here in sentence 2 should be innervated, which means to which is the word one with the INNERVATED, innervated, which means to supply vitality or strength. This is what the massage was doing, or the massage provided. The word enervate means to destroy vitality or weaken something, which is just opposite to innovate, and that is why we cannot take enervate, ENERVATE, to be the answer here. In sentence 3, entomology fits in the context as it refers to the study of insects. So it says that wonderful memoirs of anatomy and metabolism, and this is why the correct answer should be entomology, which means the study of insects, while the other word etymology is the study of words, which is not at all part of the context here. Let's move on to sentence number 4. Sentence number 4 reads, the Thracian spearmen who were watching him from the door began to jibe at his cowardice, which means they were making fun. Which is the word here? The answer is G-I-B-E, which means to make fun of someone, and that is why it's the correct word in sentence 4th. Jibe, the other one, which is J-I-B-E, is to be in agreement with somebody or something. Sentence 5 has to use the word H-O-R-D-E. Is that the correct answer? It says a fine hoard or hoard of gold coins wrapped in lead foil and hidden in the wall was discovered. The correct answer here is H-O-A-R-D, which means a collection of money or gold or valuable things. A collection of, you would say that you have hoarded gold, you have collected gold. The other word H-O-R-D-E, you must have read the reference in many newspapers many times. The word H-O-R-D-E means a mob or a crowd of people, and this is why the correct answer here again for question number 92 is option B, which is AAABB. This is what brings us now to question number 93 to 95, which was the last passage given in the in this particular mock 1. Question number 93, let's move on to that. This passage, by the way, was about the IRA and the Good Friday Agreement. I hope you have read about the or you know about the conflict of the Protestants versus the Catholics in Ireland. This is what the passage refers to. If you were to come up to question number 93, which is here on your screen right now, it's an inference question. It says, which it can be inferred that the fallout of the Good Friday Agreement was what? Now, interestingly, there is no fallout of the Good Friday Agreement mentioned here in the passage. And the passage does state that implicit in the peace process, it reads there in the passage that what was implicit in the peace process was the acknowledgement and recognition that the entire conflict had been a political one. This is what happened in the peace process, that they at least recognized this fact that there was a political conflict. It does not say though that the violence was termed a political conflict due to this agreement, due to the Good Friday Agreement, and this is why we cannot go ahead or go along with this. Option D is the right answer here. None of the three statements go along the lines of what can be inferred from the passage. We just ruled out option A. Option B says that it led to a controversial situation for the British government and forced a review of the agreement. There is no review of the agreement mentioned in the passage. Option C says that the families of those who had fallen prey to paramilitary violence could not hope for justice. Now, even though the passage does state that it was undoubtedly, as the passage said in its words, a hard pill to swallow for any family member or loved one of someone killed by paramilitary violence to see his or her killers or killer escape justice. It did mention that these people would feel bad if justice was not provided. It does not state that the killer or killers escaped justice due to the agreement. So this was not a fallout of the Good Friday Agreement, that these people were not brought to justice. The killers were not brought to justice, and this is why all three cannot be inferred from the passage, A, B, or C, and the correct answer here is none of the above, which is option D. We move on to question number 94. Which of the following options best explains why there are still attempts to criminalize the Republican movement? This was mentioned towards the last paragraph of the passage. The correct answer to question number 94 is option B. It says in the last paragraph of the passage that there is information given in the previous there was the second last paragraph. There was information given in the previous paragraph as the reason behind attempts to criminalize the Republican movement. So if you were to read it, the text, specifically the fourth paragraph also, it states that even though the IRA and other Republican military groups have abandoned violence, they continue to believe that the conflict was a legitimate war of liberation. Option B thus becomes the correct answer, that despite having given up a violent path, members of the paramilitary groups, they are still involved in conflict. They are to a certain level, they still believe in the legitimacy of the war that they fought in, and this is why option B is the correct answer. Now, why are the other three options, how can they be ruled out? Option A says that the effectiveness of the agreement, again it speaks about the effectiveness of the agreement. This is something which is not mentioned in the passage at all. Option C is also ruled out since the passage does not state that this move will lead to justice or pave a way for a new system of justice. This is something that the passage does not deal with. Option D again, which speaks about the growing understanding between communities which were involved earlier in the conflict, and this is again some information which is not there in the passage. This is why option, if I may repeat, option B is the correct answer for question number 94, which brings us to question number 95. Which of the following options best explains the tone of the passage? As I told you before, you will need to know the various tones that usually appear for passages. You will need to know the meanings of those words. For example, here there was this word D, expository, and you had to figure out the meaning of the word also to figure out which is the correct option here, or which is the correct tone here. The correct option for 95, question number 95, is expository, which means explanatory. That the author uses an explanatory tone. He wants to explain certain things in the passage, and that is why you go with option D. In the passage, the author seeks to explain a particular situation, the situation of the conflict. If you were to refer to the first line of the passage, it asserts that the point should not be lost. The author also moves on from there to explain why the conflict in North Ireland took place. He also dwells on the issue from various viewpoints. For instance, he mentions the British government, the IRA, the other Republican paramilitary groups, how the families of the victims of the conflict feel. He mentions all those viewpoints, and at no point in the passage does he take a side. This is why we can remove option or negate options A and B. It is not subjective because he does not take sides. It is not argumentative because he is not providing his own arguments, or he does not argue towards a certain point. He mentions very clearly, he explains the entire thing, he mentions every viewpoint. And option C is incorrect, narrative, because a narration, by the way, presents a sequence of events. It only mentions a sequence of events. It does not give explanations into viewpoints like this passage does, and this is why there is no particular sequence that this particular passage follows, and it follows an expository style in which the author seeks to inform or explain or describe, you could say, or define his or her subject, which is the conflict in North Ireland, to the reader. Option D is thus the correct answer. I hope you have understood why option D is the correct answer. Expository is the tone, which brings us to our question number 96. Our next question, which was you had to find out the incorrect usage of the word play. which of the sentences A, B, C or D uses the word play incorrectly. The answer to question number 96 is option B. Option B reads, the subordinate knew that appraisals were going on and so he played in every request of his boss. This is what the option says. The correct answer or the correction here in option B should be to play along. Play along is a phrase which is used to mean that you are cooperating or you're concurring, agreeing with someone or something. This is why it should have been that the sentence should have read that appraisals were going on and so he played along every request of his boss. Option A reads, Olga knew that Henry was a prankster and so she played along with his joke to keep up the fun. This I just read. It says that to play along is to cooperate. To play oneself in is to become accustomed to circumstances or conditions of a game or activity. This is what was there in option C. In option B, the usage is incorrect. As I already mentioned, to bring into play is to utilize something, is to bring something into usage, and that is why options A, C and D use the correct idioms, while option B is the incorrect usage.
This is a fairly simple set of 4 questions and should be taken as a bonus. So this talks about 4 different diseases, namely G, L, T and Z. So these are the 4 diseases, and it also talks about 4 symptoms related to these 4 diseases, and these symptoms are rash, fever, sore throat and headache. And each one of these diseases would have a combination of these 4 symptoms. That is all what this set is all about. So, looking at the very first question, it says that this patient exhibits sore throat and fever. Then which of the following is definitely true about the patient? Mind you, it talks about exhibiting exactly, or rather 2 symptoms, not exactly, sore throat and fever. So this patient exhibits sore throat and fever. Alright. So coming back to the given conditions. Now look at the first condition. A patient with disease G exhibits rash and fever for sure, along with either sore throat or headache, but not both. So here, this patient who suffers from disease G would certainly be having fever, as is given here, but may or may not have sore throat. So if a patient exhibits sore throat and fever, we cannot be quite sure that this patient suffers from disease G. Alright, so now we shall move to the next question. A patient with disease L. In this condition, it's stated that a patient with disease L exhibits rash and fever, but neither sore throat nor headache. So if a patient suffers from disease L, would not exhibit the symptom of sore throat, but our patient in the first question of the set exhibits sore throat. So we can certainly say that this patient does not suffer from disease L. And luckily, we find the mention of this fact in option C. And this becomes your answer. It's as simple as that. Let's come to the second question of the set. If a patient who has one of the 4 diseases does not exhibit rash, mind you, does not exhibit rash. So this patient does not exhibit rash. Alright. So again coming to the given conditions. Again and again in this question, while doing this set of questions, we shall be going through these given conditions. And please do not forget that this patient in the second question of the set who certainly suffers from one of the four diseases does not exhibit rash. So look at the first condition. This condition says that a patient with disease G exhibits rash. So the very fact that a patient with disease G exhibits rash, it means that our patient in the second question of the set cannot be suffering from disease G. So we straight away rule it out. Now the second condition tells us that a patient with disease L exhibits rash and fever. Again, if there's a patient who has disease L, exhibits rash, but our patient in the second question of the set does not exhibit rash. So again, our patient cannot be suffering from disease L either. So this also we rule out. Now the third condition tells us a patient with disease T always exhibits sore throat and headache, and sometimes either rash or fever or both. So if a person who suffers from disease T may or may not exhibit rash. So since our patient in the second question of the set does not exhibit rash, so it may or may not be suffering from disease T. So it's a question of maybe. Now let's come to the fourth condition. This is given that a patient with disease Z always exhibits headache and sometimes either fever or sore throat or both, but never rash. Mind it. So if there's a person who suffers from disease Z, never exhibits rash. Alright. So here you need to be very careful about one of the most basic things, and that is, if there's a patient with disease Z, this person will definitely not exhibit rash. But only because there's a person who does not exhibit rash, that does not necessarily mean that that person suffers from disease Z. So this also is a case of maybe. So, and in fact, whatever I said in the last 2-3 statements, right, that can be summed up like this, that only because A implies B, that does not necessarily mean B implies A. That is it. So we ultimately conclude that the patient in the second question of the set would certainly not be having disease G, would certainly not be having disease L, or maybe having disease T, or maybe having disease Z. But whether this person has disease T or disease Z, right, one thing is for sure, that this patient would certainly be suffering from headache, because any patient with disease T will certainly be suffering from headache, as is given here. Similarly, any patient with disease Z always exhibits headache, that is given here. So answer to this question is that this patient exhibits headache, which is your first option, option A. So let's move to the next question. If a patient who has one of the four diseases exhibits neither fever nor sore throat, so this person neither exhibits fever nor sore throat, then we have to determine of the given three things what all are correct. And I repeat that this person does not exhibit either fever or sore throat. Alright, so we shall come back to the conditions. Condition 1 says that a patient with disease G exhibits rash and fever. Alright, only because there's a patient who suffers from disease G would always exhibit rash and fever. Let's focus on fever. Alright, so the patient in the third question of the given set cannot be suffering from G, because this person exhibits neither fever nor sore throat. So we rule out disease G for this particular person. Similarly, the second condition says a patient with disease L exhibits rash and fever. So fever is again here. And this clearly given that this patient in the third question of the set exhibits neither fever nor sore throat. So our patient in this question, which is the third question of the set, cannot be suffering from disease L also. So let's move to the third condition. A patient with disease T always exhibits sore throat and headache, and sometimes either rash or fever or both. Alright. Now this is given that our patient in this question exhibits neither fever nor sore throat, but a patient who suffers from disease T exhibits sore throat. So we can again be fairly confident that this person does not suffer from disease T also. Now, a line of wisdom here for all of you. All of us we know, going by condition 5, that a patient cannot have more than one disease out of the 4 at the same time, and we have already ruled out disease G, disease L and disease T for this patient. This means that this patient must be suffering from disease Z or Z. So please do not commit the blunder of checking with the fourth condition also here for this particular question. So we are sure about this, that this patient in the third question of the set suffers from disease Z. And as this person suffers from disease Z, one thing is for sure, that this person would exhibit headache. And this person would never exhibit the symptom of rash. Now, looking at these three things, we know that the first statement, she exhibits headache, is absolutely alright. We are sure about this also, that she has disease Z. And we are sure about the third one, that no, it's not there. Because if a person suffers from disease Z, that person can never exhibit rashes. So first and second statement, they are both right, and hence our answer is B. Now, looking at the last question of the set, this says that if a patient exhibits 3 symptoms out of the given 4 symptoms, then she definitely does not have. So this patient in the last question of the set exhibits 3 symptoms. Let's come back to the conditions. These conditions give us all the details of these 4 diseases, and those people who have already solved 3 questions of this set can straight away recall that a patient, the second condition, that a patient with disease L exhibits rash and fever but neither sore throat nor headache. So this person with disease L would be exhibiting only 2 symptoms and would not be exhibiting the remaining 2. But the patient in the last question of the set exhibits exactly 3 symptoms out of the given 4. So we can be fairly sure that this patient does not suffer from disease L. And hence that is our answer. So here our answer becomes disease L.